This video is brought to you by mybookie.ag. What's up, everybody? We are here for the Fight Night card, headlined by Song Yadong versus Chris Gutierrez. At 26 years old, this will be Song's third Fight Night main event in a row. Before he fought Ricky Simone, before that he fought Corey Sandhagen, and now against Chris Gutierrez, they're really trying to promote this kid. He is the ideal Chinese superstar that the UFC would hugely benefit from. He has the fighting style, he has the look, he has the youth, the skills already. He's looking like an elite bantamweight at such a young age, and there's no question as to why. He's like a 4-1 favorite over Chris Gutierrez, who's a fine fighter in his own right, but this fight seems like a definite setup or a layup for Song Yadong. Anthony Smith versus Khalil Rountree's on the card. That's a pretty interesting fight, I think. Anthony Smith coming off one win. Looks like he may be a little bit over the hill, and Khalil Rountree should bring a very dangerous fight to the veteran. So there are a lot of veterans like Tim Elliott's on the card, Jimmy Malarkey's on the card, but there are a load of prospects. Andre Muniz can still do some interesting stuff. He's on the card as well. Kevin Jusei is a good prospect out of France. Park Hyung-sung, the undefeated flyweight from South Korea, good finisher. Most of his wins are by finish. Some knockouts, some submissions. He's an interesting prospect to look up to, but I would say the main prospect of the whole night is the undefeated Japanese future star, Tatsuro Taira. Yet again, every single time this 23-year-old competes, it's always fun to watch. So far, 4-0 in the UFC, and after his fifth fight, I would have to think he would get a ranked flyweight. The fighter of the night, in my opinion, is of course no other than Song Yadong. He's the guy they're building up. He's the guy that might become a future star, especially headlining a lot of China events in the future. The stake of the night, the fighter that's in hot waters, is for sure Shannon Ross. 0-2 in the UFC, 0-3 in his last 3 fights, all knockouts by the way. He got destroyed by Jesus Aguilar with that quick overhand like 17 seconds into the fight. Before that, it was like a minute knockout when he fought Clayton Rodriguez, and even on the Contender Series, he got knocked out. Shannon Ross definitely needs a win. If he doesn't, that could be it for him in the UFC. And he's not young either. He's 34 years old in the flyweight division. The banger of the night, the most explosive fun fight on the card, I think is the co-main event, Anthony Smith versus Khalil Rountree Jr. We all know Anthony Smith has quite a bit of heart. They call him Lionheart for a reason. He's shown his ability to come back in fights, or at least not be completely withered away under punishment. And we know Khalil Rountree could definitely bring forward some punishment. But Smith has the experience on his side. He has the grappling. He has a lot of things he can go to. He also hits hard in his own right. He's a big light heavyweight with good straight punches mostly and decent linear movement that can draw in Khalil Rountree for some big shots. But I'll save it for the breakdown when I get to that featured fight. And then the fight of the night, in my opinion, is Song Yadong versus Chris Gutierrez. These are the two most technical fighters on the card in my opinion. Both guys are actually very skilled. Even Chris has good kicks, fast with his hands, creates really good angles on his opponent for his attacks, spinning attacks out of nowhere, but then Song Yadong has that equalizing power. He's getting better with his wrestling, he's getting much better with his kicks, and he's so insanely fast and precise with his punches. That should be a very, very good fight. But we're going to start with Anthony Smith versus Khalil Rountree Jr. Smith's got that dog in him sometimes, man, and he's definitely going to need it in this one because Khalil Rountree is going to try to take his head off with everything he throws. And we know Smith's chin is not necessarily the best. But even if he did have a good chin, the way that Rountree throws his limbs at you, there is no chin that can really take a lot of that. The leg kick's going to be powerful, and we know Anthony Smith does keep that long, wide stance. Leg is there for the taking. Smith is definitely going to have to move more and just throw out straight punches. Block the hooks that Khalil Rountree loves to throw more than anything else. He throws more looping than he does straight, and Anthony Smith has to come down the center with the 1-2. Keep the jab on him, throw out some front kicks as well. Front kicks to the face as Rountree plods forward sometimes. He will bounce around occasionally, but when he's on the hunt, he likes to walk you down. And if Smith is able to keep enough distance between him and Khalil Rountree, he could throw up those front kicks to the face. He could throw up some knees because he does have a height advantage. He's about 3 inches taller. And just keep the jab at all times. For Khalil Rountree, if Anthony Smith ever throws a low kick, he's got to annihilate him the way he did at Gokhan Saki. Be as fast as he can to enter whenever Smith throws a low kick on him. And he needs to crowd Smith. Maybe not throw as much from the open space because that's where Smith is going to be in his advantage. But walk him down, feint a lot. Someone as scary as Khalil Rountree is, his feints are going to be a lot more effective to get the opponent to react. And the reactions that he wants is for Smith to move backwards. So faking power hands are a definite way for Smith to back up because he moves linear more than he does laterally. There's going to be about time where Smith hits the cage. And from there, that's where Khalil Rountree could start to use more lateral movement for his own punches. Not big steps, but small steps to the side to line up his overhands, his hooks, and even his body kicks. Keep Smith on the cage as much as possible, and when he gets close enough, he could do what he does best. Crowd his opponent, overwhelm them with power. So ultimately, my prediction for this fight, I think it's a lot closer than people are saying. You know, a lot of people seem to be riding with Khalil Roundtree Jr. in this one, but a lot of people are also riding with Ryan Spann against Anthony Smith, and Anthony Smith did pull through. It was a very, very close fight. But I do think at the end of the day, Roundtree Jr.'s power, tenacity, ferocity, explosiveness is going to be a little too much for Anthony Smith to get by. We said something similar about Ryan Spann before, but Roundtree does commit a little bit more intelligently with his offense than what Ryan Spann throws forward. So I do expect Roundtree to knock out Anthony Smith in the second round. But I am not counting out Anthony Smith whatsoever with those straight shots and catching him with a knee or an elbow in close. Smith could be a little tricky sometimes with some of those in-close elbows, but he's definitely going to need to time those perfectly because under that Roundtree fire, he doesn't get many chances. And then we go to the main event, Song Yadong versus Chris Gutierrez, the kicker versus the puncher. But I'm very curious to see if Song Yadong does take the fight to the ground. I'm willing to see how much leg kicks he's going to throw out there. We know Chris is a much better kicker, at least on paper he's supposed to be, but Song is improving so quickly, he just surprises us every time we see him. Like, he fought very well against Corey Sandhagen. A lot of people thought that Corey was going to be way too much for Song Yadong. There was a lot of talk, and this Song was in way over his head to fight Corey. Then the fight happens, and it's even on the scorecards going into the fifth. Whether we agree or disagree with that, we cannot doubt, we cannot deny that Song Yadong did perform very well against one of the best bantamweights in the world. And he did it at such a young age as well. He's still young, and he's only getting better. There's going to be a major punching power difference between the two. Chris is fast with his hands. He can move around and jab you up or even throw spinning attacks like he did against Frankie Edgar out of nowhere, but it's his kicks overall. He has very powerful leg kicks, dangerous head kicks as well. Could throw them at different kind of angles too. I'm very curious to see how Song moves in and out of those kicks. Does he want to stay in as close as possible? Or does he want to stay far enough where he can bait out the kicks, cause them to miss, and enter as quickly as possible with the speed that we know from Song Yadong to punch out Chris Gutierrez? Both of these are viable options for Song Yadong to capitalize on Chris. But the thing is, Guteirrez has a pretty decent chin. He's never been knocked out in his career. We know that Song has knocked out most of his UFC opponents. And his combinations in close are some of the most dynamic I've seen in this weight class. The other fighter that compares with the amount of power and technique that they can produce in close range with their boxing is Petr Yan. Song Yadong is another fighter who's extremely dangerous in the pocket like that. Look what he was able to do against Ricky Simon and Marlon Moraes. He has a nasty head kick like he performed against Julio Arce. My favorite knockout of his, though, was his explosion on Alejandro Perez, where he just fired out from distance and KO'd his opponent so quickly. That can happen against Guteirrez as well, who's looking to keep his opponent at range as much as he can. And I think ultimately, because of Song's footwork speed, because of his boxing ability, and because of his potential wrestling ability here, and him looking better every time I see him, it's so unpredictable how much better he's going to look against Guteirrez. It's such a treat to see a fighter at this age progress as quickly as he is. And he's also like 3 years early of his prime. But he does have a lot of fights. He has 29 professional fights, so that's a lot. Most of his losses were in the regional scene when he was like 17 to 20 years old. I'm expecting Song Yadong to win this fight, and I'm going to go by a 5th round TKO. I think the damage is going to eventually settle in on Chris Gutierrez, and Song Yadong is going to get that big favorited win. The odds are crazy on his side, and I can see it. I can kind of see it. I think Guteirrez is really good, though. I think people might be overlooking him just a little bit, but the stylistic matchup should be pretty good for Song Yadong if he is able to get in close. And you could capitalize on these odds with mybookie.ag. I mean, almost a 4-1 favorite for Song, and he's only increasing from there. It's better to get on him now, as more people are putting their money on him. As you can see, Khalil Roundtree Jr. is a -205 against the +170 Anthony Smith. I think it's closer than this. I think Anthony Smith's experience and how dangerous he can be sometimes is being overlooked here, but I am going with Khalil at the end of the day. Andre Muniz is actually the underdog against Junyoung Park. That is interesting, because Muniz should have a huge grappling advantage over his opponent. But Park is good on the ground. He has a stronger naked choke, and he has much better striking. But Park is powerful. He has pretty good striking. Not the best takedown defense, right? He was taking down a bunch when he fought Eric Andrews, for an example. So I am actually going with Andre Muniz. I'm surprised he's actually the underdog in this. Jusei versus Song Kenan could be a scary one for both guys. Jusei does not move his head, and Kenan hits like a truck. But Jusei does have a big grappling advantage. I like to see him shoot more instead of going for so many throws. Song Yadong does hit hard. He's the guy that knocked down Ian Gary, but then he just threw left hooks the whole fight after. Not the best fight IQ. That's why I'm ultimately going with Kevin Jusei. Of course, the biggest favorites on the card are the two biggest prospects, Hyun-Sung Park and Tatsuro Taira, are both evenly a minus 550 over their opponents. Definitely lock-ins for both guys, I think. So there's a lot of interesting odds on this card, but if you want, you could also put down a parlay, group up fighters that you're confident in winning to multiply your earnings. And my bookie's giving you a deposit bonus where they'll add 50% of your first deposit all the way up to $1,000. So if you put in like 100, they'll put 50 on top of that. It's going to come with a rollover withdrawal requirement, just like they all have. And make sure to use the promo code WEASEL, that's WEASLE, to activate my bookie sign-up offer. Remember to visit mybookie.ag today where you can win big. And now let's get into the rest of the card. Nasrat Haqparast versus Jamie Mullarkey. I do like Nasrat in this fight. He's really upped his output. He's performing way better in the pocket, picking his shots better than before. Not a great wrestler, but he has some takedowns he can go to. Jamie Mullarkey actually is much more successful with his takedowns than Nasrat Haqparast is. So it'll be interesting to see how both guys implement those. I mean, Dan Hooker was taking down Nasrat like it was nothing. And that is a bit concerning about his chances against Mullarkey here, but Mullarkey's striking hasn't been looking too impressive, especially when he fought Mohamed Naimov. There was a stretch in his career where he was looking extremely dangerous, like when he fought Devontae Smith and Kamaworthy back-to-back. It looked like Jamie Mullarkey may be getting somewhere, but then he got destroyed by Jalen Turner. He got dropped by Michael Johnson, even though it was a very close fight. A lot of people still think that Michael Johnson should have won that. Mohamed Naimov knocked him out. And then against a much older John McDessie, he didn't look extremely impressive, right? When Nasrat fought John McDessie, he was at least able to get the knockdown. He was at least able to implement more damage. So this is why I do think that both fighters are somewhat competitive with each other, but I am ultimately going to go with Nasrat Haqparast, and I think he'll win this through a decision. I think his output, which has improved so much throughout his career, is probably going to get the better of the scorecards in this one. Tim Elliott versus Sumo Darji. I'm going to go with Tim Elliott. It's a massive grappling difference between the two, and that's the main reason as to why. Sumo Darji doesn't have the greatest takedown defense. Even Matt Schnell was taking him to the ground. Sumo Darji did catch him in a submission, so he does have some of those. Can he catch Tim Elliott? Possibly. Tim Elliott's been submitted by a bunch of guys, but the guys he got submitted by are no joke on the ground at all. I mean, we're talking about Davison Figueiredo, Brandon Royval, Mohamed Mokayev, Joseph Benavidez' guillotine, which is something that's known of him. The only one that stands out that's kind of strange was the Ben Wynn submission loss, but you have to remember that Ben rocked him before he got his back. That could happen with Sumo Darji. He does hit pretty hard. He's pretty precise with his power hand, but I do think that Tim Elliott is going to shoot early. He's going to get him to the ground and try to get his own submission attempts in there, ultimately win the fight through a decision. Jun Young Park versus Andre Muniz. It's a similar kind of dynamic to the other fight, but I think that Andre Muniz is very dangerous on the ground himself. Park does have a lot of submission wins, but he's got a lot of power in the stand-up as well. Just like what he's shown in his last fight against Albert Duraev, he hurt him, dropped him, he eventually got his back and choked him out. His last 3 wins are actually by rear naked choke submission. Can he submit Andre Muniz? That would be a big feather in Park's cap, because the only guy that has submitted Andre Muniz in the UFC was Brennan Allen. And we know Brennan Allen is insane on the ground. And the other great grappler he fought was Paul Craig. Paul Craig and Brennan Allen are some of the top grapplers from middleweight and up. So if Park can pull this off, which I don't think he will, it would really be impressive if he does. If he could pull off a submission win here, that would be insane, because we do know that Andre Muniz is going to shoot. What happens from there? I'm expecting Muniz to get the better of Park, but it's going to be very interesting to see how many opportunities Park gets to reverse him, get his back, and choke him out. If the fight's on the feet, Park is punching him out. Like, that's just what's going to happen. So I am going to go with the underdog, Andre Muniz. Then we go to Song Yadong versus Kevin Jusei. I'm definitely going Jusei in this one. Song Yadong hasn't been doing too great in his career. He's very powerful, super confident in his hands, a little overconfident at times, as shown in the Ian Gary fight. He's a tough guy. I wouldn't say he has like the best chin in the world, but he's pretty tough. Ultimately, he's going to get tested in the grappling, I think, more than anything else. I mean, obviously, it's the path of least resistance. He doesn't have great takedown defense. I'm scared for both guys, man. I'm not going to lie. More scared for Jusei because he has no defense. Sometimes he picks his hands up, but his head is there to be hit. Doesn't move his head, it's up tall. I could definitely see Song Yadong catching this guy and putting him down. Kevin Jusei has to get this fight to the ground. He needs to get in the clinch, hip toss him, something. If he gets the fight to the ground, the fight should be his. As long as it stays standing, I don't like his defense at all. I'm going to go with Kevin Jusei, but I am not confident at all. Hyun-Sung Park versus Shannon Ross, I definitely got Park. not much to really say here. He's just way too much for Shannon Ross. Garcia versus Costa, not too much has changed. I think Garcia has a pretty good ability to get in and out with the jab. His boxing can be pretty underrated, but I do think that Costa overall is going to be the more capable striker of the two. He has very good kicks. Sometimes he'll swing wild in the pocket if it gets there, but from distance, I think he should be able to do some good work on Garcia. So I do have Costa on that. This is definitely the worst fight on the card. Luana Santos versus Stephanie Egger. This is a fight for sure. Santos got decent grappling if she goes to it. We didn't see in her UFC debut. I mean, she just swung and that's it. I like to see her tighten up her punches a little bit more. She does throw some slapping punches, like literally comes down at your face like she's slapping you. She's got better power, I think, than Egger. Egger is very slow and not as coordinated as Santos is, just mechanically. Santos has a good base in the clinch. She has good scrambles, some good submissions throughout her career. I think it's a good win for Luana Santos. Not the biggest fan of the fight, I'm not going to lie, but I appreciate Santos. Tatsuo Tai versus Carlos Hernandez, what do you say about this? This is another fight that's just set up for this guy to run through somebody. I think Tatsuo Tai submits him. Then we got Rayan Dos Santos versus Talita Alencar. Talita is a multiple-time IBJJF world champion. She's actually extremely good on the ground. I'm going to go with Talita. I think she's the underdog going into this. Both fighters are good on the ground. Both are very small. In fact, Dos Santos used to be an atomweight. She's 5'2", Talita's 5'1", but Talita does have a very credentialed Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background. That's why I'm ultimately going to go with her in this one. And that is ultimately the end of the predictions, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to give this a like, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video.